Hello, everybody, and either welcome or welcome back to my podcast. As per usual, I want to remind everybody that if you do like this podcast, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Okay, so let's just go ahead and jump into this because this subject is a bit controversial, or at least I think it should be more controversial. And that is this idea of quote-unquote crazy people with guns, or another way to put it, this idea that we need to start attaching mental health screenings as a precondition to gun ownership. This is a topic that comes up now and again every time you have a mass shooting. Came up again after the YouTube shooting incident, which, forgive me, I cannot pronounce that woman's name to save my life, so I'm not even going to try. But I know that story kind of came and went so fast that we didn't really have a chance to discuss it because obviously she was not white, she was not male, and she was not right-wing. So therefore there's no story there apparently. But it did reignite the idea that there should be mental health screenings and mental health background checks that go along with the ability to purchase a gun. It's something I've been thinking about for a little while, and every time somebody brings it up, that it's very vague. They kind of throw out, we should have mental health screenings, but nobody ever really lays out exactly what that would look like. So I decided that I would go ahead and lay out what I think it would look like and why it would be such a horrifically bad decision to even attempt to do this. Now, I'm basing my idea of a mental health registry and a mental health, basically, background database off of the same way that we already do the gun control background database, which is, it is a national database. It is administered by the FBI. And if you're not familiar or if you've never bought a gun through like a gun shop or anything like that, basically you go, you fill out your paperwork. They kind of put it into the computer and it beep, boop, boop, and then they send it off to the database, and then the database kicks back whether you're good to go or you're not good to go. So I'm kind of basing the idea of what the mental health database would look like based on that, and that would kind of be how it would pan out. The problem with that is when you get on the database as a no-go for a background check, it's pretty clear cut as to how you got there. Like, obviously, if you've been convicted of a felony, you're a no-go. If you've done jail time, you're a no-go. If you've ever been convicted of anything domestic violence related, you're a no-go. Like, it's pretty clear how you end up getting on the bad list. Whereas with a mental health background check database, I don't see how it could possibly ever be that clear cut as to how you got on it and whether you're a yay or a nay. Having said that, I do want to discuss some of the specifics of where I think this could all go horribly wrong. Want to cite a study, and of course, links in the show notes as always, that 4% of gun violence is associated with mental health, and that those who suffer from mental health issues are more likely to be the victims of gun violence rather than the perpetrators. Which, to back it up for a second, if you have a subset, say 100% of the people with mental health issues, and only 4% of those people are causing a gun violence problem, so the other 96 can just go kick rocks? I mean, why do they need to be penalized for something that only 4% of these people are doing? That doesn't seem very fair to me. Also, I'm not entirely sure this would even hold up to a legal challenge if such a thing were ever to exist, because there's nothing in the Second Amendment that says anything about health as far as owning a gun. So if somebody really wanted to legally challenge the idea of a mental health registry, and if they got bounced out of having a gun because of something on the registry, even if they were legitimately cuckoo crazy pants, I don't know if depriving that person of their right to own a gun would even hold up in court. So there's that. But kind of deeper issues here is, I wonder how exactly one would even begin to build this database. What I'm thinking is basically somebody would have to come up with some kind of matrix where you pop in information and then it would spit out like, yes, this person is safe, or no, this person is fucking insane and they can't have a gun. But who would create this matrix is my question, and what kind of information would go into it, and where would the lines be drawn as to whether this person is okay and this person is not okay? Because mental health is a really complex issue, and even if you pick a mental health illness, say depression, there's different degrees within saying that somebody is depressed or they suffer from depression. I mean, there's people that manage it on their own. There's people who manage it strictly through talk therapy and do not go on medication. There's people who do talk therapy and go on medication, all the way up to people who do need to go spend time in a facility where there is 24/7 around the clock kind of surveillance on them to make sure that they don't physically harm themselves. So where in that spectrum of even just depression, not even anxiety or anything else, but where would the cutoff be? Like, where would it be like, okay, this person is okay and this person isn't okay? You know what I'm saying? Like, who's going to make that decision? And even on the topic of anxiety, like, there's people like myself, I'll say it, I suffer from mild anxiety. I do manage it on my own. I do manage it homeopathically. But there are people that can do that because, like I said, mine is mild. It's not anything like what a lot of other people experience. So I'm not trying to say that I'm anywhere near any of that. But there are people who do need to be on medication for it. There are people that do need to be in therapy for it. And there are people who, even with all of that, still just there are days when they can't manage it at all. So again, where on the spectrum is the cutoff point for that? Where do you say this person can't have a weapon? Where do you say when this person can't have a gun? Who makes that decision? And if it is applied to you, how do you appeal that decision? How do you say, no, I'm okay, at least okay enough to have a gun? Like, I'm not going to say I'm well, but I'm okay. You know, like, what would the appeals process be if you somehow found yourself in this database and you feel that you don't belong there? And then even beyond that, there's different situations where, I mean, there are people who have depression because of chemical imbalances. There are people who have anxiety because of chemical imbalances. But then there's also people who I call it temporary insanity. And I'm joking when I say that. I don't think they're insane. But when I say that, I'm talking about people who have a temporary situation that they're trying to get through in a particular frame of time where there is an end game, where you do stop therapy, you get off your meds, and because you're okay, you're cured. Like, say you're a woman and you're suffering from postpartum depression, or say you're a man and your wife leaves you and she takes your truck and your kids and your dog. Like, obviously these are temporary situations. Like, our fictitious woman, she's going to get better, her hormones are going to balance out, she's going to start bonding with her baby. And so then at that point, you don't need to be in therapy anymore. You don't need to be on medication anymore. Or same with our fictitious man. He's going to get over his rough patch in life. He's going to get himself back on his feet. He's going to get his life together, maybe meet another nice lady. And again, there's an end point where you're like, okay, I'm good now. I can stop therapy. I can stop being on medication. But I bring that up because the second thing that I kind of want to know how this would pan out is, how is that going to be held against you? And when I say that, what I'm thinking is there going to be like a time frame where one needs to have been out of therapy and off of any kind of drugs that you were on before you become eligible to have a gun again? And if there is a time frame, what exactly would that time frame look like? I mean, would we be talking like a month, 6 months, 9 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years? Like, how far out from being in therapy or being on medication would you have to be in order to be deemed okay by the state to have a gun again? Like, say our fictitious man, as part of getting better, he makes some new friends and he gets into guns and he's 3 months out of therapy and he wants to buy his first gun because he wants to do this as a hobby. Is he going to get told, well, I'm sorry, Mr. Man, you were in therapy and you were on antidepressants 3 months ago, so no, you can't have a gun. Even though you've been out of therapy and you're better now, you still don't qualify under our matrix. Or say our fictitious lady with the postpartum depression, say 6 months out of therapy, something happens at her house, somebody breaks in, and now she wants to buy a gun for protection. Is she going to get told that, well, I'm sorry, Miss Lady, since you were in therapy 6 months ago and you were on antidepressants 6 months ago, you can't purchase this gun for self-protection now? The idea of there being a time frame that one has to be out of therapy in order to purchase a gun is one of those that really does bother me, because I do think there are a lot of people that do seek out mental health assistance and they do end up on antidepressants because of temporary situations. And I don't feel like that should ever be held against you. I mean, I don't think anybody should ever be dissuaded from seeking mental health if they feel like they need it. But I definitely don't want this to be a situation that because you had a situation, you went through a rough patch, however long ago you had it, that that's going to be held against you in the future. I don't think that that's fair. I don't think that that's a good thing to do to people. And I just don't, I don't like that. Like that worries me because that's, I think, really where the problem would come into play. An even bigger issue than all of that is what happens if you do get this mental health database up off the ground. What happens to those who end up in the database that already have guns? Now, I know there isn't technically a national gun database per se, but the background check kind of lets the federal government know what you've got. Like, there's a safe assumption that if you've gone through a background check, then you probably purchased a gun. And so what do you do with that information cross-referenced with the mental health database information? And before you think I'm crazy for even bringing this up, it's already happened in Hawaii, the only state that actually has a state gun registry and a state medicinal marijuana registry. They cross-referenced the registries and sent letters out to those people who are on medicinal marijuana and also have weapons that they have to turn their weapons in, which, I mean, that can be a whole episode in and of itself, but just for the sake of this episode, disarming people for being on medical marijuana is the dumbest thing ever, basically because people are not on it mostly for mental health reasons. They're on it for pain management reasons. So I don't even know where Hawaii gets off doing this, but the idea that it can't be done is obviously false because it has been done. And I have no faith in thinking that it would not be done on a national level if such a thing were possible. In fact, I believe there's probably a lot of people who would agitate for doing exactly that, of disarming people who are in this national mental health registry on the basis of, oh my God, they might pop off and kill everybody. I can see that happening. No problem. In fact, I would be surprised if it didn't happen. So that's another issue to think about, is what's going to happen to people who already have guns, but then end up on this registry. Are they going to be disarmed? Are they going to be disarmed forcefully? Is there going to be a fine for them keeping their guns? Are they going to go to jail for keeping their guns? Which, stop and think about it for a second. If people who have done nothing illegal all of a sudden have to disarm, how does that look? How does that feel? It doesn't look or feel very good. In fact, that looks bad. That looks really fucking bad. And you wonder when it's going to be an especially bad look? When people like veterans with PTSD end up getting drawn into that. When former law enforcement with PTSD end up getting drawn into that. Which, however you may feel about those two groups of people, those are people who made a deal with either the federal government or their state government that they would do a job. And if in the course of that job they come back scarred, that's not on them. Like they did what they were supposed to do. So if you really think that it's going to be a good look to disarm veterans or former law enforcement with PTSD, I got news for you. That's going to piss off a lot of people, even a lot of people that might actually back this. That would probably be the tipping point for a lot of people. I know it would definitely be the tipping point for a lot of right-wingers and a lot of gun control people that aren't going to like this anyway. But if you start bringing up the idea of disarming veterans, that is going to be such a shitstorm that just for that reason alone, this is a bad idea. Not to mention, like I said, disarming otherwise law-abiding citizens who have done nothing other than the high crime of seeking mental health assistance because they felt like they needed it. And then another issue that I kind of started thinking about today, which is on the other side of the equation, which is those who work in the mental health field, those who do provide mental health assistance. This would create such a horrible ethical dilemma for these people, because basically the way you get on the gun control database is you get reported to it, which I would imagine with a mental health database would operate in the same way, which would mean that mental health providers would have to report to the FBI who their patients are, which I don't know how I would feel about that if I was a mental health professional. Like with every health profession, but especially mental health, it's so crucial that patients trust their doctors. And especially in the realm of mental health, the biggest part of that is trust and privacy. The idea behind going into therapy is that what is said remains between the doctor and the patient, and that any kind of prescriptions that are handed out, it's private. It's between the doctor and the patient. Nobody else needs to know. So at this point, if you were creating a mental health database, every mental health provider would have to make this decision of, do I comply, report to the state, and risk destroying the trust that I've built up with my patient? Or do I not comply, keep the trust that I have with my patient, but face possibly, I would imagine, either incredibly punitive fines or jail time? Like, that's a horrible position to put these providers in, because there's no win for them there. It's either you risk losing your client, or at least losing the trust that your client has in you, which is pretty much the same, or you risk either possibly losing your business or going to jail. I mean, that's going to disincentivize people from offering mental health assistance, because I know a lot of mental health providers would have an ethical and moral problem with this, because it's always been established that doctor-patient confidentiality is sacrosanct, and I don't know how many of them would be willing to violate that for the sake of something that they probably don't even agree with in the first place. So that's another wrinkle to think about, is what kind of pressure is that going to put on kind of the opposite side of it, not just on patients, but on doctors who treat these patients. And since we're on the topic of doctors and patients, if you are somebody who is in a doctor-patient relationship, that means that you at some point had the level of self-awareness to say that you need help, and then to go seek help. I'm not worried about those people. Those people figured out that they need help, and so they are seeking help. Those are not the people that you really need to be worrying about. The ones you need to be worrying about are the ones who are not seeking help, which obviously are not going to end up in this database. So it makes it even that much more fucking stupid, because you're going to penalize people who have already figured out that they need help, and they're seeking help, which is not the easiest thing in the world to do. Like, having that revelation and then actually acting on it. I'm not worried about people who have done that. Like, they're working on themselves. They've got their shit together. They're trying to get right. So I'm not worried about what those people are going to do, because they've already made the decision that they are going to seek help, that they are going to get better. The people I worry about are the people who either can't make that decision or won't make that decision. And there's nothing about having a mental health database of people that is going to address that issue. And for those who are out there who haven't sought mental health assistance, even though they need it, don't give them another reason to not seek help. I mean, the idea of getting put on a national database and potentially losing one of your constitutional rights is a pretty damn good reason to not seek mental health, even if you need it, because you know that this is going to strip you of one of your fundamental rights. And so for that alone, you may not seek mental health, which I'm not okay with that. Like I said, I want to eliminate barriers to seeking mental health assistance if you need it, not erect more of them, and not create more of a stigma around seeking mental health assistance if you need it, which this would do just that. It's creating a second class of citizen based on the idea that because you realized that you needed help and you went and sought help, all of a sudden you're less than, or you're somebody who needs to be looked at as a threat, which that's really fucked up. Like, those are the people that you don't need to worry about. And I don't want anything to come between people coming to that realization that they need help and then going to seek help. We do have a mental health problem in this country, and adding on to reasons to not seek mental health is not going to help that at all. It's going to make it worse. Don't fucking do that. I want to see people who need mental health assistance be able to get it in a safe, legal, above ground sort of way. And creating especially something like this, like a mental health registry where your business is going to be known by the state. I mean, even if you're not interested in purchasing guns or having guns or gun ownership or even give a shit about guns at all, I can see where you wouldn't want your information to be known by the federal government. So what I could see happening is there kind of being this bumper crop of black market-ish mental health assistance where it doesn't go on the books and it's kind of done kind of like back alley abortions were back in the day, which obviously were not beneficial to anybody. It wasn't beneficial to the people providing them. It wasn't beneficial to the people getting them. It was incredibly dangerous. I mean, people ended up dead. And with the current drug crisis that we have with this country, I don't want to see people get pushed into that direction of having to go underground to try to seek mental health assistance or to get antidepressants or to get any other medication associated with that. Because like we've seen, when you go to the black market to try to get these drugs, you don't know what the hell you're getting. So this is just another reason for me not to even go down this road. Keep mental health assistance safe, keep it above board, keep it legal, keep it out of the state's business, so that these people can get well in a safe environment. And finally, my last kind of biggest point here is you can make all of the gun control laws in the world you want. You can make them as punitive as you want. You can make them as strict as you want. You're not going to be able to legislate bad shit from happening. And to kind of circle back to where we began with old YouTube shooter girl, whose name I can't pronounce, I believe it was Saturday, the body cam footage was released from the Mountain View Police's interaction with her. And like they said, she seemed completely fine. She seemed sane, rational. She was speaking fine. Everything seemed fine. There was nothing that they could take her in on, which, I mean, they did what they could do, and I'm sure they feel awful, but I mean, there was nothing else they could do. She seemed perfectly fine. Which, to prove my point, is you can't prevent every bad thing from happening, no matter how many laws you put into place. Bad shit's going to happen to good people. It sucks. I know. I wish it wasn't that way. I wish the world wasn't like this, but it is what it is. And trying to just squeeze tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter down on people who have done nothing wrong to try to prevent future tragedies, it doesn't work. And it's incredibly unfair to the people who have done nothing wrong to be submitted to these just increasingly draconian rules surrounding gun ownership because of the possibility of something might happen. Something always might happen. I mean, if it's not guns, knives. Obviously, London has an issue with this. Cars, trucks, bombs, baseball bats. I mean, you name it. Like, you can kill somebody with pretty much anything. And so there's only so much you can do to prevent people from doing what they want to do. You can't legislate that away, unfortunately. I know I wish tragedies didn't happen, but that is part of life. Bad shit happens. And it's not that you necessarily have to accept it per se, but you do have to accept that it is part of life and that you're never going to be able to completely get rid of that. Okay, I think I've chewed on y'all's ears long enough for today. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Always, I want to remind everybody, if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. Again, I'm on iTunes, I'm on Google Play, and I'm on Stitcher. Take care, and until next time.